Spanish lawmakers have urged their government to recognise Palestine as a state, albeit only when the Palestinians and Israel negotiate a solution to their long-running conflict.
No solo debemos hacer un llamamiento al diálogo, por muy importante que este sea, sino lanzar un mensaje cargado de valor político. Y este mensaje es que el Parlamento español, de manera unánime, considera que el reconocimiento del Estado palestino es la mejor contribución que podemos hacer para lograr la paz.
The symbolic motion, which echoes similar votes last month in Britain and Ireland, received unanimous backing from the lower house, despite a last-minute push from the ruling People's Party to weaken it. A wave of support for the Palestinian cause has swept over Europe recently, with the moves reflecting mounting frustration at Israel's expanding settlement programme on land the Palestinians want for a state, following the collapse of US-sponsored peace talks. Yesterday in London, Europal Forum and Middle East Monitor held an event to thank MPs who have been supporting the Palestinian cause, particularly in last month's Parliament vote for recognition of a Palestinian state. Just under 100 years since the British government viewed with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, the British House of Parliament reached a near consensus to finally recognise a state of Palestine.
To the right, 274, the noes to the left, 12. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Baroness Jenny Tong had this message for Palestinians in Britain.
Why not get a group of, say, 12 of you, 12 wise men, like the burghers of Calais, you know? And the most articulate, prepare your case and insist on that delegation of 12 wise men going to see each of the party leaders in the run-up to the general election.
Well, still with me to discuss Palestinian statehood are Chris Doyle, Director of the Council of Arab-British Understanding, and Martin Linton, Director of Labour to Palestine. Martin, this is now something of an international wave. Ireland, Britain, Sweden, Spain. Why this sudden outburst of support for the idea of a Palestinian state?
Well, it was started by the Swedish election at the end in September, when the new Swedish Prime Minister, who's a Social Democrat, announced in his acceptance speech that Sweden would recognise Palestine. Of course, there are already 134 countries that recognise Palestine, but very few West European countries. So that's what started the ball rolling. But probably what gave it the biggest push was the decision in the House of Commons, as we just heard, by 274 votes to only 12, to call for the British government to recognise Palestine. That's had far more coverage, far more publicity abroad than it has at home, in fact, because it's really been seen as a huge signal in Palestine itself and elsewhere that things are on the move. And then we've had an Irish vote and last night a Spanish vote. Although I have to point out that although the Spanish Parliament would probably have supported recognition in the same terms as the British Parliament, because of the tragedy in the synagogue in Jerusalem, they allowed the Spanish government to water down the text of the motion so that it actually only says that there should be recognition after a negotiated settlement, which is no different from the existing policy. But nevertheless, there is a big move. The French Parliament is going to vote the next week, and the French Socialist Party, who are the majority party, are backing recognition now. And I think once Britain and France and Spain have taken a step in that direction, then most of the other West European countries will follow.
Chris, I mean, we know that these are only symbolic votes, but I mean, it could be argued that at the moment when a diplomatic solution, a two-state solution, looks further away than it ever has been, the Palestinians internationally are making more diplomatic progress than they ever have done.
Well, I think you should see these votes really as a major indication of just how far Israel's stock internationally has fallen. It's less about the actual text, it's less about the wording of these motions than this very, very clear message to Tel Aviv that elected politicians across Europe are simply fed up with the settlements, fed up with the obstinate nature of Israeli diplomacy, fed up also after what happened in Gaza this summer, that they see yet another war on the Palestinians there. So with this in mind, I think that this prepares the ground for the European Union and its member states to take some more serious actions on Israel in order to pressure it to end these huge settlement programs and to actually get real about finding a lasting, durable peace between Israel and Palestine. And what we've also seen, which I think is actually extremely important, is the leaking of a non-paper from the European Commission that indicates that they are actively considering the possible withdrawal of envoys, the banning of settlement products, and a raft of carrot and stick measures. Now, it's a long way between the situation we have now and actually introducing some of these, but they are under active consideration, and it reflects very deep-rooted objections to the settlement projects, and in particular the drawing up of red line issues. For example, if the major E1 settlement project is approved, that's to the east of Jerusalem, cutting off Jerusalem from the West Bank, or if, Givat Hamatos, a settlement to the south of Jerusalem between Jerusalem and Bethlehem is also approved. These are issues that the European Union is flagging up to the Israelis as something that they cannot tolerate, and it would have a direct impact on relations.
Okay, well, let me just put some of those points to Martin. Martin, do you think that that Chris is right, that we maybe get beyond the symbolic and into policy which might actually begin to change the balance of forces there?
Well, yes, it's as well to remember that the recognition, although it's hugely emotionally, symbolically important issue, it doesn't actually change the lives of Palestinians at all. But what I think the votes have done in the British Parliament and elsewhere is opened a door to, it's been a kind of cathartic change where parliaments have started considering steps that they've never considered before. And I think that, that snowball, once it starts to roll, will just pick up speed. But two things need to be borne in mind. One is that the EU, the European Union, does have more power to change, to bring peace to the Middle East than any other organization, because it has a third of Israel's trade is with the European Union. From the other point of view, Israeli trade only accounts for 0.7% of the European Union's trade. So, and the European Union has this sweetheart deal with Israel called the EU-Israel Association Agreement, which includes a clause that insists that Israel should be respecting people's democratic rights and civil rights, which they clearly aren't. So the EU has the power to suspend this agreement and put real economic pressure on the Israelis.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we're going to have to move on there, but thanks to Chris Doyle and to Martin Linton for talking to us today. Now, we're going to have a look at some more of the news, but before we go to a break, we want to have a look at what you've been saying on Twitter. At Imran Siddiqui tweets about the demolished Palestinian home that we mentioned earlier, saying, "Imagine if every time there is a murder in the United States, the president demolishes the home of families and of suspects." And speaking of the US, at Lisa Bloom tweets about comedian Bill Cosby after he's been accused of rape. Lisa tweets, "Every media outlet who asks the question, how will this hurt his legacy, without asking, how are his victims been harmed, is equaling rape culture." The charity Islamic Relief tweeted about a different topic, highlighting the sanitation around the world. They said it's something many of us take for granted, and we can't wait for open defecation to stop. And that's part of the World Toilet Day campaign. Before we go on a final break, here's a tweet from Ed Miliband after a debate with celebrity personality about his plans to have a mansion tax. TV personality Mylene Klass questioned the Labour leader over his plans, asking if there was anything he didn't want to tax. He responded by sending out a tweet with links to his plans. In an allusion to Klass's first hit song, he said they were pure and simple. After the break, we'll be taking a look at protests in Indonesia. See you then.